Hi everyone, I'm Barclay Loggie and welcome to another demo. We're going to have a little play with right angle weave today, or RAW as it's known when it's abbreviated. I have previously done a demo or a masterclass on right angle weave, so if you've not tried the stitch before or you need a bit of a refresher, the link to the masterclass is in the description of this demo. So have a quick look at that if you need a quick reminder. This is what we made in the masterclass. So it was just flat right angle weave using two different colored beads. And today we're going to play with it a bit. We're going to take the same color beads, so both of them in the same color, but two different sizes. And what we're going to do is we're going to end up embellishing it, a bit like the one that I'm wearing today. So this one I did the right angle weave in silver, and then I've embellished it with Swarovski crystals, kind of in the rainbow, a bit of a muted rainbow color theme going on there. So that's what we're going to learn to do today. Just as we always do, we're going to start off by looking at the materials we're going to be using. So I have got size 11 Miyuki seed beads in Duracoat Galvanised Champagne, and I've got exactly the same color in the size 8 seed beads. So this will be the strip that we start doing in right angle weave, and once it's embellished it'll look a little like this one. So in the first one I've used, I think it's 13 different colors of Swarovski crystals. They're 4mm bicones and they are graduating in color. And for this one that I'm going to make with you today, I'm going to be using 3mm fire polish in Jet AB. You can see the lovely sparkle there. Going to be needing a toggle clasp. I'm going to be using 6-pound Fireline in black satin. You'll have heard me mention before, I really like the black satin color because it doesn't leave any mucky residue on your fingers while you're beading. And I've got a needle. I tend to use size 10 beading needles because they've got a nice big eye to thread, and I've got some thread zappers to end off any loose. Ready to get going. I've got my beads ready. I've threaded on approximately 2 meters of my Fireline onto my size 10 beading needle, and that should be enough to get you through the cuff. We'll add in an extra thread to do the embellishment. Now, if you've not done right angle weave before or you're unsure of what I'm talking about, I strongly recommend you have a look at the tutorial where we made this bracelet, because the base underneath the crystals there is exactly what we've done here. And you will see that we beaded it in 3 rows. We did a top row beading towards the right, then a middle section beading back towards the left, and a lower row beading towards the right. And this will be exactly the same, 3 rows, but our final 4th row we will be beading back towards our starting point as we embellish it. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about this initial right angle weave because hopefully you're either proficient in it already or you've had a quick look at the masterclass. I'm picking up 4 beads to start with, 3 11s, 1 8, and I'm moving them down towards the end of my thread. I don't need to leave a massively long tail because I'm going to be back at this end with my working thread to add on a clasp. So I just need a little tail, 5 centimeters or so, that I can tie off securely when needed. I've passed the needle back through all 4, and to make my first little cross or square of beads, I'm going to pass the needle back through the first one again. And when I get my hands out the way, you can see I've got a little cross or square of 4 beads. I've got 3 of the 11s on the top and the 8 is at the base. Now I need to continue with my design beading towards the right. So before I pick up any more beads, I need to be exiting this 11 on the right hand side. So I'm just going to pass through those 2. Now I'm ready to do the next little square or cross, and this time I'm going in an anti-clockwise direction by picking up 1 8, 2 11s, and my third 11 I'm borrowing from the section before, and that makes up my 4 beads for my right angle weave. And again, I'm going to pass through the 8, always following the thread path so that there's no thread showing. So I've come through the 8 and I want to come through this little 11 on the side, ready to continue with my design. This time I'm going on the top first because my thread is exiting the top of the 11. So I'm going to pick up 2 11s and an 8. I'm coming in a clockwise direction and I'm passing back through that little 11 on the side as my 4th bead. And get yourself through to the edge of your work so that you can continue. So that's all there is to the top little row. Now a little tip, because it can be difficult to see, especially when your beads are all the same color, to get everything lined up correctly, if you hold the tail end and you hold your working thread end and you give it a little tug and you pull on the tension, the next time you put it down, you'll see that those beads line up really nicely. So you would bead all the way along for a full length that is going to cover your wrist. So keep going for 6 inches, 6.5 or 7 inches, however long you like your bracelet to be. And then it's time to turn around and bead towards the left, beading the middle section. We're still doing the base of our cuff. And to start the middle section, I want to be exiting from one of those big 8s. So I'm just passing the needle through the 8. And my middle section is going to be made up of 11s on the sides and an 8 top and bottom. So I'm picking up 1 11, 1 8, 1 11, and I'm passing through the same 8 that I started from to make up my 4 beads. As I said, I am going through this pretty quickly now, so if you're getting a bit lost, have a look at the Right Angle Weave Masterclass and you won't be lost at all. So now my thread is exiting the top, or I should say the left-hand side of this 8, and just as we did on the first row, we want to be exiting the little 11 on the side because that is the point that's closest to the direction in which we're beading. So I'm coming out the base of this 11. I'm going to pick up an 8 for the bottom, an 11 for the side. I've got an 8, the very next 8 along the top there that I'm going to use. Make sure you just go through the 8. That's 3 beads. And to complete my little square, I need to come back down through this little 11 that I started from on the side. And there I have my first 2 sections in the middle row, and I'm going to pass the needle through till I'm exiting the 11 on the extreme left hand side for the direction that I'm going to continue my beadwork in. At this stage I'm going to be going in an anti-clockwise direction. My thread, sorry, I'm just trying to get my tail out the way there. My thread is exiting the top of the 11 and I'm going to pass straight through the 8 from the row above. Then I need a little 11 for the side and an 8 for the bottom, and I go back through the 11 from before and the 8 at the top. That makes my 4 beads for my right angle weave. And I've got my middle row completed there. And again, to do the 3rd row, I want to be exiting the 8, the first 8 that's on the bottom of that row. So I've beaded to the right, I've come back towards the left, and I'm now going to be beading to the right again with my final row. And I'm exiting an 11, I'm exiting an 8. The whole of this bottom row is going to be adding in 11s. So as this is the first one in the row, I'm going to be picking up 3 11s because I need a total of 4 beads. And I'm going to be passing the needle back through that same 8 that I started from. as we've done before, I want to be exiting the bead on the outermost edge so that I can continue with my design. So I am exiting the base of this little 11 on the right, and I'm ready to pick up 2 more 11s. I'm coming through the next 8 from the row before, and I'm going to pinch the little 11 on the side of what we've just done to make up my 4 beads. Pass through the next 2 to get to the outermost edge. I'm going in a clockwise position now, so I'm going to go straight through that 8. Then I'm going to pick up 2 little 11s, pinch the 11 from the row before and back through the 8. And so you will continue until you've got all the way across to the other end, and you will end up with a beaded strip that looks a little like that. And it's actually great on its own. You don't need to embellish it. It makes a really nice chain or bracelet all by itself. So as I said, I've done that really quickly. If you're stuck or you got lost, please, please, please have a look at the Right Angle Weave Masterclass, and hopefully you won't be stuck anymore. If you are stuck, send me a quick question and I'll reply really fast. Having done the basics, now the fun starts, where we start to make it look really pretty with embellishing. Just wanted to show you size-wise, I haven't beaded so that the 2 ends meet. I've left a gap because adding in your clasp always tends to add about an extra inch of beadwork to whatever you've already done. So just bear that in mind. If you like your bracelets hanging loose, that's fine, but I like these to sit quite snug around my wrist. I think you get more of the effect if it's a snug fit rather than a loose fit. So with the embellishing, the one I did before, I used 4mm crystals. Today I'm going to use 3mm fire polish. You might have some sparkly crystal rondelles, you might have some little mini pearls, maybe 3 or 4mm pearls. You might just want to use another color seed bead, or you might have some mini gemstones that you want to use instead. You can use anything to embellish. You'll be using exactly the same techniques as I'm going to show you, and it's going to look super. So before we actually start embellishing, because I've got my working thread down this end, I'm going to actually attach one end of my clasp. So you can see that my thread is exiting this last 11 on the bottom on the right hand side here. So that was the end of my beadwork. The middle point is this 11 in the middle here. So I want to be exiting that bead in order to add on my clasp. So I'm just going to pass my needle through the beads following the actual thread path because I don't want any excess thread showing. So I'm just going through them one by one until I'm exiting that 11 right on the end and in the middle. So you can see it's exiting there. Now I'm going to add on one end of my clasp. I'm going to add on the loop or the hoop of my toggle, and I'm going to use the 11s again. So I'm going to pick up 5. No rules. You pick up as many as you want here. If you've beaded and you find this strip of beadwork is a bit short, you'll want to add on more beads than I'm adding on here, just to make this attachment a little longer. So I've picked up 5, and I'm going to go through the little attachment loop of my toggle, and I'm going to come down through the first 3, if I can get my needle to behave, through those first 3 that are closest to my clasp. Pull everything up snugly. And then I'm going to pick up 2 more because I've come through 3 and I initially added 5, so I want it to be symmetrical, and I'm going to pass the needle back through the first little 11 that I started from, and there I've got an attachment for part of my toggle. Now your clasp takes the most wear and tear because you're constantly putting things on or taking them off. So my suggestion is that you reinforce it by going back through the beads you've just added to attach the clasp, through the clasp, and I'm going to come back down through those 3. It just makes your attachment a lot stronger. Down through the last 2 on the other side, and then back through that little 11 that we started from. So because I've reinforced that, I know that that's not going to come undone anytime soon. So now you can see over here, it depends. You can embellish right to the edges. Whoops, let me move this over a bit. You can embellish right to the edges, or you can start slightly in, as I did with this one. Particularly if you've made your beaded strip a snug fit round your wrist, it's not going to move that much, so you're not going to see the back where the clasp is. What you want to be doing is exiting from an 8, because we're going to embellish the middle row. So from the 8 to the 8. And I'm going to just come through this 8 on the bottom. I'm going to come in 1. So I'm coming around here. I'm just working my way through the beads. Whoops, got stuck with my thread. And I'm going to come down 1 more. Just following the pattern that your beads have made. And I'm going to come through this little 8 here. Right, now I'm going to start embellishing. So I've left a little gap, 2 lots of 8s on that end, and I will try and leave the same on this end to keep it symmetrical. So my thread is exiting the left-hand side of my 8, and I'm going to pick up a little 11, one of my embellishment beads, a 3mm fire polish, and another little 11. And as I said, my thread is exiting the left, so I'm going to be going through the 8 that sits above the one that my thread is exiting from, but I'm going to enter that bead from the right-hand side to the left-hand side. So your thread is going to do a little diagonal shape across the beads, but you're not going to notice it with the beads. It means the beads are going to sit really nicely on your beaded strip, on your base. So now we're exiting the top. I'm going to come down through an 11. We're exiting an 8, and I'm coming down through an 11 on the side. Thought it wasn't going to play ball for a second there. And I'm going to come through this 8. I want a little gap between each one, and I'm going to come up through the 11, I'm just making my way around those little crosses in the center until I can exit an 8 on the bottom in exactly the same direction as I did the first one. You might want to fill it up completely with beads, but I like to have a little gap. So I'm now exiting towards the left again, ready to do my next embellishment. I'm going to pick up an 11, a little fire polish, and an 11. These little 11s are just a little bit of added extra. You might, if you're using bigger beads to embellish, you might not want to use the 11s. If you're using even smaller beads, you might want to add 2 11s either side. Right, so back to the 8 that my thread is exiting from is this one right here. So I need to come through the bead on the top above it, the 8, from the right to the left. And you'll see that means that my little embellishment beads are both sitting the same way on the diagonal. I haven't got one that way and one the other way. So again, I'm going to move through my beadwork now. So don't skip out any of the beads, even if it's tricky to get down through that 11. Don't skip it out because you'll just see too much thread. Through the 8 at the bottom, I'm doing my little maze work now as I thread through the beads to leave another gap. Up through a little 11, across through an 8, down through the next 11, and through the 8 at the bottom. So I'm now the same way again. My thread is exiting towards the left, and I'm going to have exactly the same gap between my embellishment. So pick up an 11, a fire polish, and an 11. And my thread was exiting the left of the 8 on the bottom, so I'm going to go through the 8 above it from the right to the left. And again, you'll see my beads are lying in the same direction. I've got the identical neat gap between them. So I'm going to continue doing that all the way across to the other end, remembering to go through, to pass through all the beads I can. So down through an 11, across through an 8, up through an 11, across through an 8, down through an 11, and now I'm across through an 8, and I am in the same position I was before to add my next little bit of embellishment. So I'll come back to you when I've got all the way back to the other side. I've got all the way across to the other side, and all that's left for me to do is to add on the other end of my toggle. What I did forget was, and this is only because when I got to the end here, I still had enough thread to come back and embellish, but you may not have had enough thread when you got to the end of doing your base. In that case, you could end off your thread by adding in this part of the toggle and weave your thread away within your beads, and then just start a new thread on this end the same way and add your embellishment all the way across till you get to the other side, where you can add on your other half of your toggle. So I'm exiting that middle bead there. I'm going to do exactly the same on this side. I'm going to pick up 5 of my 11 seed beads. Let me move this over and move this one out the way a bit. Then I'm going to go through the attachment loop and back through the 3 beads that are closest to my clasp. Pull it all in tight, pick up another 2, and then come through the same 11 that you started from. Pull it in tight, and then go through it again, just as we did on this right hand side. You want to reinforce the left hand side by going through all those beads again. Now if I bring this one into shot, you can see I attach the clasps differently. On the Swarovski crystal one, where I picked up 5 beads here, I only picked up 2 beads here, and I came back through one and added one, so it kept the attachment a lot shorter, and here I've made the attachment a bit longer. You can see that my beaded strip on the gold one was slightly shorter than the beaded strip that I did on the silver one. So I've elongated the bracelet by adding beads in where I attach the clasp. So you need to just reinforce that, and then once you've reinforced the end of your clasp, you just need to weave that thread away through the pattern of your beads and snip off the end of your thread. So as you can see, whether you've used crystals or fire polish beads or seed beads or gemstones to embellish your bracelets, whether you've done it in single colors or you've used a whole rainbow of colors, it's a great way of reinforcing the right angle weave technique. It gives it a bit of height and 3D too. If you turn it on its side, you can see those crystals just sticking above the basic beadwork a little. Hope you've enjoyed that. I'll be back soon with more tutorials. Until then, bye.